to know what
To learn.
yeah.
At least back then. So emphasis for a lot of people older, trained, and neurotrained physicians want children currently. I think
Because you make a very different.
I'm one of the pediatric
They weren't
directors.
okay.
I'm actually JUN.
I don't know, but I'd like to be able to, I'd like to be able to.
So you're interested, so
And that'll be.
So you are still
Testing.
fellowship now too?
Yeah, I'm actually going to, I'm already for fellowship.
Okay.
But it's interesting.
No, I like the teaching program a lot. It's like a little bit similar. Except it just
Yeah.
I think the power
and
of
nothing has changed.
I think the power of having all the different people together. That'll
We have the Florida Blue Group here. All right.
I'm also there.
So did you work? That's radiology, right? Radiology is different things. It's just a bit more higher dose.
Not from the,
Yeah, but
for licensed dogs.
Okay.
Probably these very specific
Well,
things.
that's a big school. It's a great town now, a lot of diverse people, a lot of people I've never seen in this country. So that's
Is like
fantastic.
being able to say what the 5 most important. They must have something free online. Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. What happens?
Okay. Well, that's why I think I did it last time.
This is right now. Yeah. This is all kinds of imaging that goes through. Like MR, All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here. It's a great turnout and a lot of diverse people, a lot of people I've never seen before. So that's great. That's what the monthly seminar series is about, is to connect people, make this become a collision space. I'm very proud today to introduce Dr. Lanier. She's an associate professor here in the radiology department, and she's developed with the American College of Radiology some simulation techniques that are online for emergent diagnostic imaging. With that, I'll give you the floor. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm going to darken things because radiologists live in the dark, as you know. Also, it makes it easier for you to see. And I'd like to do a shout out to Jacksonville, our partners. They helped us beta test this, and I understand several of them are listening today. And I would like to just be very clear up front. Is that me? Having feedback? No? I'd like to be very clear up front that this is not my own tool. This was a team of people in our department who've been working on this for 4 years. And 2 years ago, we hooked up with the American College of Radiology, and it's really, really blossomed since then. I will be going back and forth to a live internet demonstration, so there'll be a little technical back and forth. We call this the Emergent and Critical Care Simulation Exercise, and it's an exercise that we've developed that our residents and now currently 18 different programs are taking online to assess their competency in reading emergent and critical care imaging. We consider it a self-discovery process as opposed to a test because we give it to them in the first year when we expect them not to know very much. and we try to help them delineate what it is that they don't know. In parallel, we're also developing a curriculum that is case-based to give them a chance to study asynchronously of the topics that we have collected that we think all residents who do emergent and critical care imaging should at least be familiar with. This is the setup. It's like a PACS workstation, and I'll show you some more about that in just a second. What is it exactly that we're trying to simulate? We're trying to simulate all of the skills that are involved in interpretation of critical care. And everybody thinks that that's about just looking at images, but it is. But it's a lot more than that. We will be looking at full DICOM image sets in this exercise, which is exactly what we do in real life. And that can be a single chest x-ray, or that can be 3,000 images of a brain with all the vascular phases in MRI and everything in between. CT scans can range from 100 images to 1,000 images or more. And in real life, that's what we have to do, is sort through a full DICOM set, figure out whether it's normal, not normal, and if not normal, what the problem is. In training, typically, we show a case or a finding, and we ask residents to talk about what it is that they see and what the differential diagnosis is. But in real life, we have to look at full DICOM sets and figure out what's going on from all of that. We also have to be able to manipulate those images in different ways, windows and levels. Is that the phone ringing? We have a phone ringing in the program, so I'm glad it was a real phone. And to make the images so that we can read them. We will be showing all modalities that we would see in critical care environment, and we look at all different body systems. The next thing we're testing is the confident determination of normal. Again, in our training program historically, we don't spend a lot of time helping people to learn what is normal. And we believe that there is a downside to overcall, as we know, more imaging at the least, procedures sometimes, surgery sometimes. And if you can confidently go through a process to say to yourself, this is normal, you can stop any further workup that might be unnecessary. And that would require that you develop a comprehensive search pattern. Once you've started looking at the study and decided that it's not normal, you need to identify all the key findings. And in our case in emergent care, there are often many findings in many systems. There may be a brain bleed and a chance fracture and a liver laceration, etc. You have to decide which are the critical findings, which are important but not life-threatening, and which are incidental to the situation. The gallstones in the patient who came in from the interstate accident. And we often get no history. We get pain or trauma. We have no idea what's going on other than that. And sometimes online medical records is not quite as fast as what's happening in the critical care environment. So we really have to have a competent and complete search pattern. And we need to be able to prioritize all the findings. We recently started this of actually including in our report the level of acuity of the findings. And emergent, of course, is life-threatening. Urgent is really important, needs to be taken care of right now. Priority is, it's important, but it doesn't have to be taken care of today. It could potentially be worked up later, like a lung nodule or a fracture. Expedite is not normal, but not critical. For example, follow-up lymphoma or an appropriate PICC line placement. And routine is just routine. In actual practice, how we communicate all of this, the ability to look and search and see things, assess what we see, give it an acuity. We can call if it's really acute, or we can put out a hopefully clear report to the practitioners. But in the simulation, we have free text entry. This means that there is no multiple choice question because nobody comes in the ER with a little badge that says, I have one of these 5 things. And multiple choice, as we know, all of us who've been in academics for a long time, you can be cued by the answers and you can gain the answers, narrow it down to 2 or something. And of course, there's no true false. Of course, we have to initiate appropriate action from time to time, not only call and make things happen, but perhaps alert interventional radiology that a bleeder is coming down, et cetera. We work with our clinical colleagues for that. And this test actually is an 8-hour simulation, and so therefore it tests fatigue and stamina as well. Okay, this is the hot seat, and I'm going to try at this moment to log in and show it to you in real time. We have been working in concert with the American College of Radiology, and they have helped us to build a platform. I can't talk and do something at the same time, so hold on just a minute. Okay, so if I am a user, okay, all of the residents who take this have ACR logins, and now we are looking at the ACR server. It's a server-side delivery, and if I am a resident getting ready to take the simulation, I would log in and say I'm getting ready to take this simulation. Okay, so right now, being delivered to us from the server are images of a chest x-ray. And on the left side, it says 27-year-old female with cough and fever. She presented to the ED last night and delivered a baby, and which was premature. So we are able to see on a web-based viewer using all these tools to manipulate the images. We're able to see diagnostic quality images. In this case, as you can see, there are multiple nodules, cavitary nodules, and a pleural effusion. So the user, all of these names, by the way, on the workflow list are generated randomly by the program. All the images are HIPAA compliant. These are real cases sent to us. Over the years, we have thousands of them in our file, and we can create a simulation. In this case, we have 65 cases that take them 8 hours to go through, and these names are randomly generated. I am not queued by anything. I can write in here whatever I wish to write. I think I'll write cavitary nodules. I cannot move to the next case unless I give it an acuity. I'm going to just give this a priority. And that just means that it's not normal. It really does need to be taken care of, but nobody's life is in the balance in the next hour. And then I submit the case, and just like in real workflow, the case comes over and is, quote, dictated. We have built the simulation to have the workflow on the left, enter the 65 cases over time. Sometimes there's a rush, just like there is in real life. There'll be an emergency rush of 3 or 4 cases all at once. The part that is not true to life is the interruptions. We get interrupted all the time with phone calls and results demands and protocol demands and, oh gosh, the IV infiltrated, et cetera. We are, in fact, in version next after next, going to build in those interruptions and demand that the user stop a certain case to go to a different case and then come back to that case, and all the things that are actually what happened in real life, but that doesn't happen right now. If I think later, oh, I forgot something, I can click back on that case, it will reload that case, and I can add an addendum just like in real life. And then I can move on to the next case, or I can pick a case to move on to. I'm just going to randomly pick some cases here. This is just a foot thing. It's normal. We show normals, as I've said. Let's see, maybe this one would be a good one. This is a nuclear medicine scan. It's a HIDA. We're looking for acute cholecystitis. We can manipulate the images. You can see that the gallbladder is not filling. but the small bowel is, and that's the pathognomonic finding for an obstructed cystic duct. They have to write that acute cholecystitis and so forth. You'll see that we do all kinds of images. This is a brain MR. This happens to be, I can play with the hanging protocols to view it in a certain way. This happens to be a previous bland infarct that has undergone hemorrhagic transformation. This patient came from the critical care unit. So we are looking at both images that people come into the ED about and people in critical care, pediatric critical care, MICU, etc. So that's how the system works. The resident works through 65 cases, looking at the real images, typing in their own responses, everything from normal to long story, 16 things wrong. Now I'm going to go and share, that's the front end. The front end is a PACS viewer, 65 cases that our faculty has determined should be on the simulation. The faculty has put together 600 plus, almost 700 need-to-know topics. And we can only deliver 65 per sim. We hope to deliver all 600 in a curriculum, but over time with the simulation, we'll be able to test all of those need-to-know topics. So by the time the residents end up ready to take call, they will have at least seen all these important topics. It's pretty hit and miss what you see during training, and we're hoping to have a body of material that the residents are familiar with before they take call. And the point, of course, is for them to learn what they don't know before they have to sit in the hot seat, and to practice how to say things clearly and communicate well. So now you are looking at the back end that the user doesn't see. And for example, we can track all the takers. We're currently giving simulation number 3. So I can just show you that we can track the users. These are all people who are registered but haven't started. There are only 2 people taking it today, although it looks like there's a lot of people taking it today because I'm taking it and I'm logged in for all the institutions. So most of those are me, but there are 2 other people taking it, one from West Virginia, one for Hahnemann. And then these are all the people who have completed the simulation that we're giving this year that we started in January, and we're still in process of administering the simulation. We then get scores. So I'm going to pick the simulation and look at those that have not yet been scored. Right now we're looking right at an answer that someone has given about a bladder adenocarcinoma which presented to the ED with hematuria. And you can see that some people just write on and on. And the graders, most of the time you can sort of sort through and figure out that they do know what they're talking about, or they don't, and give them a grade. We have the grading key right next to it that we work through. But there are occasions in which the grader just cannot figure out if the person is just throwing spaghetti against the wall or really knows what they're talking about, and then we get together and discuss those cases. In the background, there's a lot of cross-checking going on for variance in graders. Because we're just looking to teach people what they don't know, just a point or 2 in variance between graders is not really important to us. Wide variances, one person gives them a 1 and another person might give them a 10 or something, are important to understand if the graders are missing. But so far we haven't really had that. We're pretty in sync with each other. Now let's see, I just took the cavitary lung lesion, and I said cavitary nodules. So I only got 6 points. I'm going to grade myself 6 right now. I called it a priority, that's correct, and I did an addendum that didn't mean anything. So now this goes into my score as a 6. So what happens then? On the back side, we can do analysis of all the scores, and here's where, as you can see back in scoring, I'll just go back, simulation after we have a lot of sims going on. You can see that the user is a number, a 7-digit number. So the graders don't know who the user is, They don't even know what institution the user is from. We're just assigning grades based on the answer as opposed to the grading key. Once we move into grading analysis to give results to the users and the PDs and everybody, we then have names and institutions. And that's why, instead of showing you that on the fly, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint, because I don't really think you want to see all those people and their real names. Okay, so the results that we send, these results go to the program director. And as you can see, it lists the residents' names on the left. It gives them a total score. It points out how many normals they called abnormal. And we call that the overcall rate of normal. We find that when an institution starts, the residents are used to being trained so that everything they're shown is something and they're supposed to give a differential, so they call everything abnormal. But the second time that they take it, and the third time and the fourth time, they know they're going to see normals, and the overcall rate drops significantly. We did do this test on a real radiologist at one point, and that person's overcall rate was somewhere around 36. So we don't think that's a good rate. We like to be much lower in our overcall rates. The cases are divided into subsections, as you can see, MSK, chest. Every case that they're shown has been, for purposes of grading, categorized as a subsection. However, especially in multi-trauma, there are many systems that are involved. The brain, the spine, the liver, the whatever, depending on the various traumas. We're moving toward being able to grade by the abnormality. So a liver laceration would be graded under GI, and a brain bleed in the same patient at the same time would be graded under neuro, but we're not there yet. So we have these general ideas of how well the residents do. So the PD gets these kinds of results based on the SIM. The PD also gets comparative data to other institutions who have taken that SIM. And we don't tell them what other institutions have taken it. We call it institution A through Z, and then the letterhead says, your institution is L, and everybody else is some other institution. So they get the comparative data. And now this is what I really think is important. Because we see real words that these people came up with to grade, to say what they think they see, we get a real sense of what it is that they nail. Acute appendicitis, good for you. And what they don't, they dance around a bit. And we can give the institutions a couple things. Everybody in your group missed epidural abscess. Everybody in your group didn't understand coalescent mastoiditis with a sigmoid sinus thrombus. Bunches of people in your group could not make the distinctions between an aortic transection, an acute aortic injury, a dissection, etc. So we can give that feedback to the PD and say, you might want to talk about this topic to your residents specifically to help clarify what is clear to us on the grading end as areas of confusion. We also point out that, and I'm sure that those of you who've read all our reports for all these years are really well aware, that there are times when people talk all around the topic but don't make the call. For example, we'll see positive beta HCG, no intrauterine pregnancy, and free fluid. If they don't say ruptured ectopic pregnancy, they don't get the points. And then they need that feedback that they saw the findings, but they didn't make it clear to the referring physicians, some of whom may not know what that means, but most of them here will know, that this is really a critical finding and it needs to be dealt with now. So we talked to them about what everybody misses, what there's a lot of confusion about, and about just observations that we make about their residents and how they do. So we also send to the PDs results on each individual. And the PDs give these to the individual. We don't send any results directly to an individual. So what a resident would see is, here's how I did. Here's how I did relative to our group. Toward the end of our experience, we can say, here's how you did compared to everybody in our group in the whole country that took it. Here's what your scores are in different areas. And these are the specific cases that you missed. And every single resident, of course, has an individual report that lists the cases that they missed. And then they come to our website and they click on a video of the case that they missed. And I'm not able to show it to you in real time, but if they clicked on acute cholecystitis, a video would come up going through that image that I just showed you of the HIDA scan, and a faculty member would say, here are the findings, here's why it's important to notice these things, here's what's not present, here's what you should have said, here's what you should have done in a minute or two. It's a very short kind of YouTube video thing. So we test them, we grade them, we give feedback to the program director on a global basis, a program-specific basis, a resident basis. We give the residents feedback on what they missed and point them to educational videos to fix that little gap in knowledge. We've gotten all kinds of feedback from the program director about this. This one is the one that really meant a lot to me, which was basically a lot of words. But what he's saying is that he had a very exceptional resident who scored well on standardized tests his whole life. And really all the people that come into our programs are pretty smart and set the curves for most of their lives. And when they gave this resident the sim, he just flunked it miserably. And they discovered that if you showed him a pulmonary nodule, he could wax poetic about all the things that could be, but he couldn't find the pulmonary nodule if you showed him 300 images of a chest CT. And so the task for the trainers at that program was how to help this person learn to see, learn to look through the images systematically, identify the findings, and then he could wax poetic about whatever it was going to be. I think that's what makes this really important, is that we are getting at the other tasks of diagnostic imaging, and particularly in critical care, that there really isn't any other way to get at except for by putting somebody in the chair or in the chair next to us and watching them work. But even when they're in the chair next to us, they can game us. You know, I might say, what do you see? And they might say, this is abnormal. And then, of course, because I'm a teacher, I just launch right in about why it's abnormal instead of waiting to hear what they really know or don't know. So this is an objective way where there's no outside influence on what they're going to say, and we can see what they really think and what they really don't know. Okay, we've been doing it now for several years. In the first year, we only tested our own residents. In the second year, Jacksonville joined us. Thank you, Jacksonville. And Mount Sinai joined us. And in the third year, we had Mississippi join us. And then that was all simulation one. We were hand grading on paper. It was a very time-consuming process. When we developed Sim 2, ACR had joined us, and we had the online platform. And so we had 9 institutions taking it at various levels. As you can see, mostly it's R1s and R2s, which are PGY2s, PGY3s. But some institutions test their higher level residents, especially if they're worried about their competency. Right now, we're testing 18 institutions, and some of them, including the Army, Air Force, and Mississippi, have not yet started, but they're registered to go. And then we did a special simulation for another institution in which we tailored the questions to something they wanted specifically to test their residents about. And that's a direction we're moving also, which is to create sort of a Chinese menu of topic areas so that the program directors can tailor the simulation to what it is that their residents need. We won't have the same comparative data, but the program directors frequently will tell us that their second-year residents do these tasks and the third-year residents do these tasks. And it would be better if we could tailor the simulation. So we're going to try to do that within the next year. These are the average scores that we've been getting. And they always make everybody upset because, again, these are smart people and they're used to being the curve setters on all their tests. But we're not asking them a standard test. We're asking them all kinds of things. Observation skills and all that I went through earlier. So typically the R1s are around 60 and the R2s are around 70. In this case, the R3s are a little bit lower, but again, as I said, sometimes when the programs test their higher level residents, these are residents they're worried about, and they just want some feedback about that. And we don't have the scores yet for Sim 3. We think this is a self-discovery process, and we give all the feedback to everybody. We know we're identifying not only personal knowledge gaps and programmatic knowledge gaps, but we have found topics that nobody who took the test got, and they were not subtle. They were not subtle findings. And so we believe that there may be knowledge gaps across all of our educational process in our field that we're not focusing on properly, and that lots of people don't know these topics. And we're trying to train toward competency. Okay, like I said, in the future, we're going to go to some tiered Chinese menu type options. We are looking at scoring by the key findings rather than by the case. The bottleneck here is the hand grading by faculty, and there's a lot of work being done in natural language processing for the computer to grade. A lot of very smart people, including Dr. Sistrom, who's in our audience here, working on that. It's definitely not ready for prime time, but that's a direction that would make this a tool that could be used by a lot of people at the same time and graded. We also have considered adaptive testing. Those of you who are familiar with that term know that it means that we could potentially look at item analysis and pick those items to present that might give us a clue about the level of the resident, whether they got it or didn't get it. We would change the test adaptively to that, and we would be able to shorten the test to still determine competency. At this point, we're not doing adaptive testing, and we're not actively pursuing it, because we still want it to be a simulation of 8 hours in the hot seat. But that's a potential that we're looking, that we might be able to move toward. We are building an emergent and critical care imaging, which is asynchronous learning using cases, and we hope to get that out pretty soon. The simulation platform that we've developed, that being showing real images, looking at another server that shows these real diagnostic level images, and then being able to free text respond, has uses far beyond radiology. And we are currently actually testing our emergency medicine residents on plain films. And we've also tested our own radiology residents on just plain films. But we're looking to see how the emergency room residents do with interpreting plain films. There's plenty of room to use this for stroke teams and cardiac things, for medical students, especially senior students. Nighthawk services could use this kind of platform to judge the competency of people that are getting ready to read in a Nighthawk service. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about Nighthawk, but we have many private practices use Nighthawk services for their off hours to read their studies. So it's important that the Nighthawk services be competent. So that could be a use. Practice hires, if you had several people you were considering to be a partner, you can test, etc. And of course, there's a lot of hospital safety and quality assurance uses for this. Let's see. That's it. That's all I have to say. I'm happy to turn up the lights if you guys have some questions about this. Maybe I wouldn't be able to turn up the lights. There we go. So that's what we're doing. Yeah.
So you mentioned working in interruptions. How does that correlate with what you do in your oral board process for radiology?
Well, that's a very interesting question. We are certified by written boards and then oral boards. Oral boards, how many years ago? 5 years ago, maybe? 3 years ago? Stopped being oral boards, and they started being multiple choice. And everybody that had gotten through that process was really. So we're hoping, there's a lot of conversation going on about having simulation technique for boards. for certification. And there are lots of people at the ABR and ACR that are working on that. Dr. Systrom works with all of that, so he can probably, this is Dr. Chris Systrom, and he's just working on all of these kinds of projects up in Boston and here.
This is an amazing presentation. The work you have done is, this is the problem with being so big as we are. I've been in simulation for now 30 years. I never was aware of your work. It's phenomenal work. What servers do you use? Do you use the cloud or the servers that you left that serve out those images?
The server is at American College of Radiology in Washington.
ACR.
Those images that we were looking at their server.
Who does the grading?
Me,
By yourself?
Dr. Slater, and 2 other people have helped us in the past, and it depends on the volume,
So
how many
it
graders we have.
is labor intensive.
Very,
Uh-huh.
very intensive.
It's not the whole manual.
Hours.
But so I, psychometrically, I've thought a lot about, because I'm gonna be the one who has to figure out how to do the item, the findings that they assert, and we, either do natural language processing, or we have the students searching from a dictionary of findings that they assert, right, a predefined finding. And I think we can do it, but there's still a difference between making somebody sort of write a statement that sort of really shows, can you write English sentences in a way that somebody can read, that an individual, like graders like this, there may be no substitute for that, or at least that's the gold standard. And we've tried to make it so that it's really efficient for them. That they can just go through and they grade, all of one type of case, the same case at once. And so I think we got it so that it works. They can do it pretty fast. You can do it on your laptop. You can do it at home. So, there's this temptation to move to auto grading or NLP, but I think the real strength of this is these guys' real skill at figuring out how to do sort of human grading really quickly and really good. And I think I would hesitate to scrap that because it's really important.
So one of the other advantages, if you look at adult learning, the book that just came out, Make It Stick, talks about the retrieval process. And what you're actually, it sounds like a lot of what you're doing is you're making them retrieve, which obviously improves long-term retention. It would be interesting to go back and see that. I think if you start taking it from a menu, you may not have as strong a retrieval process, and you may find that the long-term outcome is not quite as good.
Right, and that's the dilemma. So in ACR, what's underneath this is the taxonomy that we created at ACR of imaging, and the taxonomy is clinical scenario is one of the axes, and it's basically a way of describing why a test got done. And then the other axis is the exam, sort of a description of the 500 or 600 or 700 exams that we do. And then the axis that's sort of orthogonal to that is the findings. And so what ties them all together is body areas. And so we're creating this taxonomy to try to sort of unify this project, but a bunch of other projects. For instance, we will probably have here in a couple of years an order entry system for radiology that gives appropriateness scores. So that will use the scenario axis and the procedure axis, right? So a scenario plus a procedure gives an appropriateness score. So then along that same thing is all the findings. So once we articulate all the findings, of which I suspect there's going to be 5,000 or 6,000, once you get everything, then the question, as you say, is going to be, can we present those so that the person has to search for them? They still have to know they sort of still have to retrieve it, and then if we can do it so that by searching, they're just coming up with this specific phrase that we want them to use. You see what I mean? But I don't, again, it's that queuing thing, it's hard to know.
Yeah, it's
There's
the-
something about coming up with it and typing
That's
it yourself.
that's
really
what the
important.
adult
Yeah.
learning says, is the harder you have to work to get it,
Yes.
the longer the long-term retention
Yeah,
is.
exactly.
And that's the
But I think
retrieval
we have
process.
these guys, this is the gold standard, which we can use. Now, we'll have collected several thousand sets of responses that we can now go back and use those as.
Is it only one rater per case, or do you have two raters review the same case? And then if that's the case, then intended, how do you reconcile any differences in the review score?
As it has been that we have graders just grading and we don't cross-grade.
Okay.
Randomly, I will look at everybody's grades, some of which are mine, and just see. We're very close. And then ACR has a tracking mechanism for each grader. And it's in its primitive phase, and we don't really use it very much right now. And then when any grader has some confusion about what to say, and we just get together as a group and go.
What do you call it? A group?
Robbie, Dr. Schlager, has a son in the Coast Guard who talks about group processes. So we get together and we discuss what did they say and how are they? Do they deserve full credit, partial credit, no credit? Very shortly, we'll be able to write notes like, this is a lethal miss, you didn't call this. And we will be able to export what they actually said and the answer key so that they can for themselves understand how it is that they got a failing grade.
Okay. As a person who is unfamiliar with radiology, one thing that struck me is you're saying one simulation session is 8 hours and 65 cases.
That's correct.
Is that the typical workday of a radiologist?
I just no, it's much
No,
more.
we do more than that, but.
Oh, really?
An overnight resident, like one of our overnight body residents who works from midnight till 6. That's a reasonable expectation of the cross-sectional imaging that they would see.
That's it.
Yeah, and that's a.
Now, can they
go more?
Can they take a break in between?
Yes.
Take a break, they can pause and resume?
Yeah, there's a whole proctor set that these guys have worked with the ACR so that, because the key is being able to deliver this to many places, and that's been our struggle, is to figure out how to, deliver it to a place that has a little room with 2 computers, and another place that has a big room with 5 computers, and then the proctors who have different levels of IT, right? And then also each institution has an IT sort of character to it, right? Some institutions are really, really tight, right? And so the ones that are really, really tight, some of our stuff can't even run, right? Because they just shut it all down. So, yeah, all that stuff. So there's this spectrum of being able to deliver it. They've really worked on it. I mean, the thing is that these guys have been doing this for 4 years, and then with the ACR, there's nobody has come close to figuring out how to deliver these kind of sims and do them. These guys are like.
So, okay, just the answer to your question is that in real life, we're trying to simulate real life. They're able to go online and look things up. They're able to grab textbooks and look things up.
Right.
And we allow that. The only thing they can't do is talk to each other.
Right.
Or to a faculty member, have another radiologist.
I
I don't know if y'all can see this, I just thought you'd like to see a sample of the content that it might be, I might have to turn the lights back off for you to see it, but if any of you are interested in what the kinds of cases we're delivering, I'm happy to tell you. Was there a question? Yeah.
As far as the reception of the program or the project itself, from a cost versus funding, how does that achieve?
Well, our chairman just came in the door, Dr. Mancuso, and he can talk to you about costs, but I can tell you it's expensive. And my time has been very focused on this for a long time. I only do just a little bit of clinical relative to this. So it's an expensive process. He allowed us to build a recording studio. We worked with WFT in building a recording studio to make these remediation videos. And for the purposes of the curriculum that's also being developed, there are going to be longer educational videos that will be use that recording studio. So maybe Dr. Mancuso, you might want to talk about the cost, but we believe we are getting at something that nobody else is getting yet, and we believe that we're changing the way we're going to be educating our residents to something that's more realistic.
Capturing some kind of revenue, if you.
First of all, the main expense, there's not been a lot of real capital outlay. It's been human capital. So it's been in the context of our academic assignments and academic time within the department. And so whenever we give anybody a disproportionate amount of that, we adjust their workload, their RVU targets, but somebody else has to do that work. So I would say that the intellectual property is a lot of physician man hours in this, and that cost has been borne by the other people in the department doing the clinical work, and those clinical revenues are what pays for all admissions. So not a lot of capital. There's a little bit of capital, maybe $10,000 or $20,000 we invested in the recording studio. With regard to cost recovery, so the heavy lifting on this was by the ACR. Okay, we started out, I don't know if you told the story about our little forays into trying to deliver this ourselves, and we ran into a bunch of barriers, and we formed this partnership with the ACR, and so they have a mission to make radiology better for everybody, okay, in the United States at least, although we have a worldview on this. But so they have a software shop over in Dubai, I think. It's right next to Apple and Microsoft and all that, and they brought their team over here about 4 years ago now.
2.
And so there's weekly meetings with their development team. You saw the tools and the screenshots and all that. All those things were developed, and the ACR IT budget bore all the costs of that development, because their idea is that we develop this platform and then other people get to use it. So that's sort of the deal. So the big costs in this were borne by the ACR, and their goal is to get cost recovery by either charging other people to use this platform, I guess, or that's just what they do with the membership dues from, I don't know, 30,000 radiologists, besides other stuff they do with that money. There is some modest recovery. The ACR wanted to price this at about $375 per user. We thought that'd be a non-starter in training programs, so it's really inexpensive per resident. I think it's $100 per resident.
Just this year, we started charging $150 per resident through 10 residents and $100 after that. And on average programs, we have a program of 20-something, and we have beta partners, Jacksonville and Miami, that don't get charged. That income is not really even going to pay for the amount of time it takes to grade.
Oh yeah, so it's a loss leader. It's a loss leader, but if you look at the social mission, what we're learning, and I'm sure Dr. Lanier has showed you, that we're identifying gaps in learners' abilities and gaps in knowledge that are very important to patients. So now, how do we really intend to recover costs? Okay, because we're not going to recover them through the fees, even if we got, there's 200 radiology programs. How many residents? I don't know, 1,000, 1,500 residents, something like that. So even if we got 50% of that market, it still doesn't pay for itself. But my attitude is if you give a test, you have to have a curriculum. So I just came from a meeting. The reason I was late is we're developing together with Toshiba Corporation a curriculum that's a curriculum delivery model that's extremely unique. It fuses more modern learning techniques, like we confine our educational package to things like, if you're familiar with Khan Academy and TED lectures, we confine our packets of information to that, presented in sort of MP3s of many lectures. We then also have a resource where we present cases just as they're viewed with all the whole set of images for people to take. We then have clips similar to the simulation of our experts taking those same cases. And what we do, and then we have what we call report templates, which guide people through the proper interpretation of a study in a particular clinical situation, like an immunocompromised host who may have fungal sinusitis. We're wrapping all this up into a curriculum delivery model, which we intend to market worldwide. And we think there's significant potential for revenue in that. We also think the tool we're developing, we can come here and demo that for you in about a month. I just saw the working prototype that'll probably be ready for a lot of people to look at soon. But we intend to market this worldwide. There's a huge thirst for this kind of curriculum outside of the United States. So we believe that we can get significant revenues that way. We also believe the tool can be adapted to use in medical schools and other educational environments. We're working with a group out of Canada called MedVersive, are the web developers that are doing this, and they're brilliant. And they've really taken the fusion of these technologies, the ability to deliver images, the ability to deliver YouTube-like content, and merging that with very, very nice web development tools. They're in the Apple model and the Google model. These guys are really sharp, and so that's where I think the real revenue is. So and realize this is all just in the critical care domain. So we've identified what we think is the highest impact area where mistakes are made that can hurt people the quickest, and we believe that'll have a lot of traction out there, isn't it?
So interesting listening to you talk. I think there's also opportunities for maintenance and certification. I don't know what the American Board of Radiology has as far as their products, but it seems like part of this curriculum would go very nicely into individuals who could use it for maintenance and certification as well.
Yeah, I know that they're discussing that. The board is very aware of it.
Yeah, and so this is part, this is part of how we work that. This will all be linked to, this is all going to be the curriculum model that I just described. And you guys seem like you'd be interested in it. I'd really like to show it to you because I think you'd run with it, okay? Because all you got to do is hang your own content on it. And we're actually developing the management of content delivery concept. How you manage that, and how you submit content and get it in and do all that. That's a big infrastructure deal. But this is like an infrastructure model that we could present to other people in how we do that. But the curriculum, not this, but the curriculum model delivery that I'm talking about, that, by the way, will be rolled out with a complete neuroradiology unit, not the whole body, but neuroradiology by November to the world. That lost my train of thought. Go on, Chris.
So, a couple of things.
I'm sorry. Thank you for getting me back on. All that, the curriculum is being delivered through our CME office here. So all of that's possible. We did this before. We did this 5 years ago with a web developer here.
Dr. Rafi.
No, the guy who runs it for UF Health now. Carlos. Thank you, Carlos. Carlos, before he, got to the job he's at now, he worked with us 5-6 years ago in doing the same thing. It worked great, and we did it with Toshiba too. When CT came out, we immediately partnered with cardiology for a joint venture, and CT cardiac imaging was new then. So we developed a program just like this, and we linked it to CME, and cardiologists and radiologists came, and they came through our CME office, and they came and they took the course, and they did the stuff, and they did the exercises, and they got their CME certificate along with it. I don't know about the nuances of MOC and the rules and regs that go with that, but I think it'd be totally adaptable. When you see the curriculum tool, you really see how adaptable it would be to environments other than radiology. But anywhere,
That's what Sim and I are looking at.
Yeah. In fact, if you like, you can join me in my office on Thursday. I have another call with the development guys at noon. I have one every Thursday at noon. So you want to come by and sit in my office with me, and you can see where we're at. It's not quite ready for an audience like this, but it will be soon.
I think we'll take you up on, I'll take you up on.
Yeah,
You and I think are thinking along the same lines.
Well, we could always, we could do that in the conference room, then we could sign in from the conference room and.
Yeah. Yeah,
Can I ask, so 65 cases, is that enough? I mean, does that cover everything you
No,
want to
no,
know?
no.
Is this a library that's going to expand?
Yeah. As I said, our faculty pulled together some 600, 700 need-to-know cases. And we're collecting up to 10 to 20 different top cases per topic. So we'll have 20 appendicitis and 20 acute cholecystitis. And then the computer will be able to pull from that pool to create different SIMs. In any one SIM, we're sampling 10% of what we think our residents should know. So hopefully over time with different SIMs, we will be testing them on all of that content. In parallel to that, we'll be teaching them that entire content with the program that Dr. Mancuso is talking about with the curriculum. So at this moment, there are some textbooks on trauma radiology and stuff like that, but nothing makes them go through a full diagram set, look for the normal and abnormal, give an acuity to the finding. So nothing does it like in real life, like the simulation. But at any one time, we're only testing a partial knowledge. And when we give the results to the program directors, we say exactly that. This is an isolated set of cases. The residents in your program who took this may or may not have been exposed to any of this. All of that needs to be taken into consideration as you're looking at the residents' results and guiding the residents in terms of their study.
When the residents take this session, do they generally do it in a 1 8-hour block?
Yes,
Do they-
yes, we're trying
So
to
then,
stimulate.
what are the logistics of that? Does that count for their work hours? Do you schedule them, protect their day that day? Or
Yes,
can
they're
some on
scheduled
the weekends?
all across all the programs that have done it so far. The residents are scheduled away from their clinical rotation to sit for 8 hours and take the exercise. We've had people talk about taking it after hours and on weekends. There's not really much technical support from ACR on the weekends, so we just do it during the day.
And it's mandatory?
In the programs that have signed up to do it, yes, it is. They all say this is now part of your training.
And it's been validated? Do you have any published validation
We don't
study?
have publications because I'm a terrible publisher, but we've had psychometricians look at this, and they call it reliable, valid. Chris,
Yeah,
Dr. Black from
Yeah.
Pediatrics has done a lot of the work on that, validating it. And yeah, so we're still in the process of trying to publish. We have IRB approval to do retrospective data review, and we're in the process of doing that too. So
At one time, 8-hour block,
8-hour block.
is it for once during the
Yes.
course of their training?
Yes, now, so far, we're just giving one a year, and typically we're doing it right before there's a shift in their assignments. We have retested residents who've done poorly after reading assignments, but we don't have enough people there to really look at what the improvement in
You should
performance
do
is.
one before,
Mhm.
and you'll follow 6 months later. So you
Yeah.
the resolution.
And my hope, of course, is that when we're trying to get through 600 need to know, that we'll maybe be able to give simulations on a more regular basis and maybe not the 8-hour block because we can't let our residents just do that, but maybe we could do it in small bodies of them to get through it. But we'll see.
The
We've
thing
got a
that
lot
makes
of-
it possible for us to multiply this 600 is that we throw normals in. So normals are free, right? So if we put in a third of normals for every scenario, then that, number one, it's important to test normals, but it also means we can mix it up almost infinitely. And there's, no possibility of getting.
So,
How long does it take the learner to receive the grade?
Right now, we're rocking with it right now. We're getting turned around inside of a week. When it was just me, it was manual and it was paper. It was more like a month before we got the results back. But we've got a really grading tool, and we're crunching the numbers and faster than we were able to do before, and so they get results very quickly. And as I said, very shortly, we'll be able to show them their exact response and the key. But at this point, we're just giving them the grade.
Yeah, so Linda and Chris have done brilliantly in something that I've had a problem with, and that's multiple choice questioning is open to gaming. And how do you really measure critical thinking besides watching somebody try to think critically, sitting by their side? And I think this is a pretty unique aspect. I'm sure you explain that you're moving in a way to grade short essay tests. And I think this is another innovation that's come out of this. You know, it's just.
Yeah, we were able to go online and look at the
Great,
ACR
great.
site. And so you can see that some people will say acute appendicitis and other people will write a small novel on what they see. And,
Yeah.
and those are also things we're trying to train. We're trying
And
to
so-
train, save the findings.
So, and to get back to the question about the scenario, the 650 scenarios is where we started with this. We developed those from various resources, but this is a consistently expandable. Both the curriculum models being developed so that you can add and subtract and correct and update curriculum in a modular way. All of the content is modular. You can pull one out and put one in if the users find it to be insufficient or confusing. We can pull a piece out and put another piece back in and be responsive to that. But just like that, people say, hey, you forgot this scenario. Oh, fine, stick it in. We'll get to it. What I'm concerned about is that we only test, to your question, we only test 10% roughly of what we believe the entire content is. It's a bit troubling to me because in that 10% we've been testing, we've identified some significant knowledge gaps across institutions, across 10 institutions, pretty good ones, who think they're preparing people. I sit here and wonder what else is out there. So I think the need to get those other scenarios in the test environment, because ultimately what you want to do is to prepare, identify all the knowledge gaps and obliterate them. Have them fully prepared to encounter that situation when it arises, you know, in a systematic way. That's the other problem with radiology education. It doesn't entirely mirror what we think is an appropriate way to approach things in medicine, and that's like an airplane pilot's checklist. Linda, you usually use this analogy. If you fail to interpret radiology images with a logical and clear and orderly thought pattern based on observations you should make on every image, then you will miss things. There's no question about that. That's not taught uniformly in radiology. You know, and so the curriculum presents that as a model. And you need to go through all this set of observations in order to say that study's negative or to arrive at the right next step. And I can tell you that's not uniformly taught along radiology. Teaching's somewhat haphazard, as it is in medicine in general. Honestly, if you think back to the history of teaching in medicine, it's like an apprenticeship or a journeyman. You know, sit with me, watch what I do, and there's enough of a knowledge base to get away from that now. You know, and there's enough tools to teach it.
Well, radiology, I think, presents a unique substrate for that because what we do can be pretty much, at least diagnostically, delivered completely via SIM. And, you know, a lot of other disciplines having to examine patients, having to do procedures, so this obviously doesn't work with intervention, but it's the one discipline that sort of the whole thing is done all online, right?
I agree with the analogy of the checklist. So in anesthesia, we have to do an anesthesia machine previous check, just like the aircraft check. We can teach it, but beyond teaching it, the question is whether there's retention and whether the clinician will be compliant. You can teach them, but you cannot make them do it. And I also want to take, so you mentioned another thing. So this set of lectures is actually sponsored by the CTSI, the Clinical Translational Science Institute, and we're trying to focus the simulation efforts at the College of Medicine, at the Health Science Center for that matter, towards patient outcomes. So in that sense, I think we would be very interested if you would explore, or to help you explore, the effect of this intervention on patient outcomes, maybe in terms of ROI, in terms of dollar value, because we could put a dollar value on an overcall that gets properly called out, and then we could put a dollar value on how much it costs to run this, and then compare the two.
I would love to sit down and talk with you about that.
So that would be a translational simulation in healthcare paper, because it would look at the efficacy of what you have done, and it's beautiful. What you guys have done is beautiful. Congratulations, it's amazing. I didn't even know it existed, and that's, as I mentioned earlier, we're such a big institution. We have those gems among us, and we don't know about them.
You should be able to
Well, as I
get those
said,
metrics.
yeah, as I said earlier, like singing to the choir at the University of Florida to talk about simulation. I mean, it's been going on here for 2 decades at least, and the anesthesia and the observatories and the Harold Center, I mean, on and on. But, yeah, we've been working on this for 4 years, and we've sort of stayed on your radar individually about it.
You know, well, we wanted to wait till we had a reasonable sample, see if there was a general level of acceptance of this. It merged well with the thank God, with the milestones that, you know, the people, you know, we've taught for years without a curriculum. I don't know how you teach without a curriculum. I mean, a real curriculum. You know, any educator knows that, but we're a bunch of doctors trying to be educators. Are there any real educators in the room? Trained in the discipline? There really are. And so I think that, you know, I think we wanted to make sure that before we brought this before a lot of people, that it was valid, that it was acceptable, it was, you know, transferable to other settings. Also, and there's a long history of great simulation here, and it's a wonderful concept, and it's, you know, you do it in the Harold Center. Linda was one of the, you know, worked at that at its origins. But I think what we're getting at here is simulating the ability to think and critical reason. And I'm not, maybe there's other places that have done that, but I think that's really important, because I think the educational system, not too many young people in the room, the educational system is producing people that are used to returning factoids as a measure of success. And I think that there is a problem with synthesis. I see it in the people we train. And so, you know, and so, that's all about critical thinking and reasoning pathways. How do you test that? You will never test that with a multiple choice test.
Yeah.
Ever.
She had a beautiful slide about that.
Yeah, ever. And you saw it, I loved it when it came back, that feedback from that program that directed.
Right.
This guy always did great on the multiple choice, but give him a set of facts and he cannot reason.
Book smart versus exam smart versus.
You got it. You got it. And God bless them, that's what they've been taught. This is your practice. No. You don't know. So I think this is also a bit of a model for, you know, we're hoping people will take this and find ways to apply it. The interesting thing that it also has embodied, so I was trying to make up my mind whether to let my kids go to, my 2 14-year-olds, when they were younger, then go to virtual school or public school. I did a lot of research on educational methods. I have to tell you, the FLVS, the K-12 curriculum is brilliant. And the Khan Academy is, I didn't know anything about this stuff. And also experiential learning and learning theory that goes back to the 30s, it's all brilliant. And I look at their curriculum from FLVS, you know, and they give them little bits of knowledge that are digestible, and they make them apply it right after that, rather than sitting in a lecture room 45 minutes, looking at their devices after the first 5 minutes, and not applying anything, and going away and forgetting it. You know, how many times do we have to learn that doesn't work? So we've tried to wrap these more modern educational approaches into this tool too. Khan was brilliant, and what he's done in Northern California is brilliant.
Yeah, he's got funding from Gates now.
He got $12 million about 4 or 5 years ago, but they've spread that all up the West Coast from Northern California to Seattle now.
Okay.
They have teachers that's flipping the classroom, and I went into the medical school building with the dean.
Yeah.
And they have that big pod-oriented thing, and I said, gee, you know, that flipping the classroom concept, and that I think that's the way to get people out of the being great test takers and better thinkers mode.
Well, this was fantastic. I think we were in
I
out of
appreciate
time.
it.
Congratulations. really enjoyed it. Congratulations. I mean, you got SCR,